Let's check the latest news updates with APARNA VATS.
Namaskar and welcome to the English Bulletin of Friends World TV. Let's have a look at the headlines. 20 years after Kargil War, how India readied nuclear weapons in IF's Mirage. Sheila Dikshit, the CM who shaped New Delhi, passes away. Iran tanker seizure linked to earlier act by UK Marines. Peter Dutton dismisses Jacinda Ardern's demands for Australia to stop deporting New Zealanders. Australian police deal with a domestic violence matter every 2 minutes. Murray-Darling Basin in most severe 2 to 3 year drought. These conditions are recorded in 120 years of records, the BOM says. Bernard Tomic loses appeal over Wimbledon fine, board sceptical he will reform on-court behaviour. The news in detail. With no experience to fall back upon, it was in the heat of the conflict that India conjured up a primitive air delivery system for nuclear weapons on Mirage 2000 fighter jets of the Indian Air Force. Barely a year after India and Pakistan officially went nuclear with the Pokhran-2 tests in May 1998, India was posed with the unenviable challenge of possible use of nuclear weapons in case of an unintended escalation during the Kargil War. With no experience to fall back upon, it was in the heat of the conflict that India conjured up a primitive air delivery system for nuclear weapons on Mirage 2000 fighter jets of the Indian Air Force. With the war being limited to the Indian side of the line of control, use of a nuclear weapon was highly unlikely. But the need to be prepared for any contingencies was incumbent upon New Delhi. Although India conducted 5 nuclear tests in May 1998 to become a declared nuclear power, the structures and processes for development, deployment and employment of nuclear forces were still being put in place. In fact, New Delhi was to release even its first draft nuclear doctrine in August 1999 after the end of Kargil War. But Indian officials, scientists and military officials dealing with nuclear forces accepted the challenge to be prepared for any eventuality during the Kargil conflict should the need arise. With Delhi emerging as the epicenter of the anti-UPA establishment, Dikshit was the first to feel the shockwaves in 2013 assembly elections before the Congress was drummed out of power in the 2014 Lok Sabha elections. And in 2015, the Congress won none of the Delhi's 70 seats. Veteran Congress leader and 3-time Delhi Chief Minister Sheila Dikshit died of cardiac arrest on Saturday. She was 81. Its longest-serving Chief Minister, Dikshit was instrumental in transforming Delhi into a world-class city, earning her national fame and catapulting her to the front line of the Congress leadership. She became Chief Minister in 1998, when the Congress was in political wilderness and the organization in utter disarray. And battling rampant factionalism, Dikshit reigned supreme in Delhi's politics, spearheading the Congress back to power in 2003 and 2008, becoming a middle-class icon. But in 2013, just as dramatically as she rose, Dikshit fell, when the change swept Delhi and signaled the rise of Arvind Kejriwal's Aam Aadmi Party. Her defeat in the New Delhi Assembly constituency to Kejriwal and the Congress's disastrous assembly election was the precursor for the party's nationwide fall. But she fought until the end. At the age of 80, she took over as the president of the Delhi Congress to fight an uphill Lok Sabha poll battle earlier this year. As Chief Minister, Dikshit changed Delhi's landscape. While the Congress at the national level was implementing NREGA and other populist schemes, she quietly ushered in reforms like handing over the distribution of power to private players. She wooed the urban middle class with road and transport infrastructure. In the Congress that took a rural, welfare-driven turn at the centre, Dikshit ruled an urban and aspirational Delhi. Though she won the state 3 times, she remained virtually decoupled with the national outlook of Congress's left-leaning outlook during UPA 1 and 2. Despite her stature in party, she too did not appear keen to influence the national outlook of the party, which remained guided by Sonia Gandhi-led National Advisory Council. Ultimately, her political fortunes were weighed down by the performance of the UPA 2 government. Taken on its own, Iran's seizure of a British-flagged oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz may seem like a brazen act of aggression. A provocative poke in the nose to both Britain and its ally, the United States. But Iran seems to view the armed takeover of the Stena Impero as a carefully calibrated response to the July 4 taking of an Iranian supertanker off the coast of Gibraltar, an operation in which Britain's Royal Marines played a major role. Though the official reasons for the takeover differ, it's fairly clear now that the seizure of the British vessel may give Tehran more leverage to get its own ship back. While Britain says it acted near Gibraltar because the Iranian tanker Grace 1 was busting sanctions by delivering oil to Syria, Iran says it intervened because the British-flagged tanker hit an Iranian fishing boat. The current tensions between Iran and the West have been escalating since President Donald Trump withdrew the US last year from the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran, with world powers and imposed sweeping economic sanctions on Iran, including its oil exports. The 2015 accord, of which Britain was a signatory, was designed to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons in return for a lifting of sanctions. Tensions have risen further since May, when the US announced it was dispatching an aircraft carrier and additional troops to the Middle East, citing unspecified threats posed by Iran. Jacinda Ardern has stepped up her criticism of Australia's policy to deport New Zealand criminals as wrong and unjust, saying she will continue to push for change. The New Zealand Prime Minister met with her Australian counterpart Scott Morrison in Melbourne on Friday morning in their face-to-face talks since the coalition won the May election. Top of the agenda for Ms Ardern was the ongoing concern about Australia deporting New Zealanders convicted of criminal offences, some of whom had spent most of their lives in Australia. If something's wrong and if something is not fair and is unjust, you don't let it go, she told New Zealand media after the meeting with Mr Morrison. I totally accept that it is within Australia's rights to deport those who engage in criminal activity in Australia, but there are some examples that will not make any sense to any fair-minded person, she said. Successive New Zealand governments have raised concern with the policy after more than 1,500 Kiwi criminals were deported since the rules were tightened in 2014. Ms Ardern repeated her warning that the issue was having a corrosive impact on the relationship between the two countries. I just think we can't take our friendship for granted, we can't take our closeness for granted, and if there is something that is causing concern for one side of a friendship, it should be raised, she said. Australian police deal with an estimated 657 domestic violence matters on average every day of the year. That's one every 2 minutes. Those figures are based on data provided by police services around the country about how often their officers work on domestic violence cases. Overall, the count is 239,846 per year around the country. There is no standard definition of domestic and family violence across all jurisdictions in Australia, and no standard way for counting the number of police call-outs to situations related to domestic violence. The details of the data being captured varies across jurisdictions and can include attendance at suspected domestic and family violence incidents, domestic and family violence court orders made by the police, domestic and family violence assaults encompassing threats and physical violence, and associated agencies reporting domestic and family violence to the police. every drought is different. But when it comes to the current drought conditions across the Murray-Darling Basin, the Bureau of Meteorology says it is now the most severe in 120 years of records. In a presentation on Thursday, climatologist at the Bureau of Meteorology, Dr. David Jones, said that the Federation drought, that is 1891 to 1903, and the World War II drought were similar to this one. The general picture across the Murray-Darling Basin for droughts lasting 2 to 3 years, this is the most severe we have now seen in terms of the rainfall totals and probably also in terms of the general runoff into the dams. He added, the variable nature of droughts make them hard to compare, as everyone experiences drought differently and not everywhere is currently experiencing its worst drought. Conditions in the southern basin are significantly less severe than in the north. If you look in southern Victoria, for example, the standout drought is clearly still the Millennium Drought, Dr. Jones said. Going further back into the paleo record, there have been bad droughts, but Dr. Jones said you could not really compare those prehistorical droughts. Certainly, this is about as bad as it has got in our records. It is pretty severe, he said. Bernard Tomic's appeal to overturn a fine for not playing to required professional standards at Wimbledon earlier this month has been denied in a stinging rebuke by the Grand Slam board. Tomic lost his first round match 6-2, 6-1, 6-4 to France's Jo-Wilfried Tsonga at Wimbledon and was fined his entire earnings of £45,000, about 80,000 Australian dollars, after organizers ruled he had put in minimal effort in the 58-minute defeat. The 26-year-old Australian appealed the decision, citing the fact he was unwell before the match, while Tsonga added that he felt his victory had been devalued. The board, however, refuses to overturn their original decision and heavily criticized Tomic's attitude towards tennis. A review of your historical record of misconduct at Grand Slams, never mind elsewhere, provides little justification for an adjustment, Board Director Bill Babcock wrote in the decision letter, which was published by the New York Times. Babcock added that if Tomic went without a sanction in his next 8 Grand Slam events, then he would be refunded 25% of the fine. He has also been periodically suspended from the Davis Cup team over the past 5 years for what Tennis Australia has called ongoing disrespect. Namaskar.